disastrous. That's all I can say. And so let's start this discussion on that front. Let me welcome the Chief Elections Officer, CEO, Chief Executive Officer of IEBC, James Oswago. Thank you for joining us in this special. It's a pleasure to have you. Kipchumba, Murkomen as well. Great to have you with us this week. Gentlemen, a critical issue. And James, let me ask this question. Are we ready for the elections in March? And particularly, let's just look at the issue Alex has been talking about, and the issue of some kind of push and pull within IEBC over the critical issue of the tender for the biometric system. What's actually going on? Are we respecting the rule of law? Please, over to you.
Just like the chairman has said, there are some delays. And the delays that we are talking about here is that we ourselves have set a timeline. And this timeline is in our election operation plan. And the election operation plan is built from the date of the election running backwards. So it is true that this contract should have been concluded at some point in the past. But duly one, it is complex. Secondly, it's very expensive. But above all, you don't want to make a mistake. And then the law has built in several layers in the process of picking up a contract. You have the evaluation team, you have the tender committee, and you have the various layers. And the law protects each and says this is the role of this particular one, then the job moves on to the next one. And if the next stage is not satisfied, you take it back for re-evaluation and something like that. This is what you're going, but the delay is really because it is a complex thing, and everybody wants to make sure that we end up with a solution that will respond to this particular problem.
Because at the end of the day, what we want as a country is a transparent, free and fair election.
True.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I'll come back in a moment. Let's just talk about that, Kipchumba, the preparedness of the IEBC in terms of the laws and your observation of the systems. Do you think we're ready for elections in March? And what's your assessment of our current situation?
It's important to believe what IEBC is telling us about preparedness for March next year. My first concern is that you find people, if you go countryside, who are still questioning whether the elections will be March. They're saying, is it still possible to come to December? Is it going to be March? I think we need to close that thing in the minds of people first, that we are dealing with March. And there is no possibility of an extension beyond March or something earlier than March, because even if you were to talk about December, the time is too short. But the second most important thing is the process that is going on in IEBC. I appreciate the fact that they are expecting to be judged by what happened in 2007, and they are very cautious in going through the process. But also they must avoid delay. It was a little bit unfortunate when the chairman tells us, these things are not handled by the commissioners or the chair, but the management. I mean, it's just like saying, these things are handled by my leg, but not my head or my chest or wherever. It's important that IEBC project an image of a team, so that as we move forward, there is no blame that will be laid on the management. In fact, that statement can be dangerous by the chair, because it can easily make us start thinking that there is a difference between the commission and the management. It's a one team by the act, by law. That is one team, and they must be able to take responsibility. I appreciate the procurement processes, but the law itself, including the Procurement Act, gives opportunities for expediting the process itself, and that's what I expect the IEBC to take.
So the buck has been thrown to you, really, I think, with that statement, saying, it's really up to you. Let me ask you this. Do you feel that there is a respect for the separation of functions in the organization, and yet that IEBC is functioning effectively together, even though there is that separation? There was suggestions that the tender committee was threatening to possibly resign. How do you then manage all this, James? What do you do to ensure the body is working as one?
Julie, you start and end with respect for the law.
Right.
The tender, the procurement process is relatively not very difficult if you follow the law. So you start and end with what does the law say. And if you have doubts, there's a mechanism for seeking advice. And at the commission, we reached out to the Public Procurement Authority, and this is part of the delay, because it goes about 7 days delay, to ask them for definitive advice, definitive opinion on certain issues. And that is required we did that. And I'm sure we will be able to get rid of this problem by next week, by the week we are starting. Like I said earlier on, you don't want to comment too much on an ongoing tender process, because if you do, you could prejudice the process, you could compromise in one way or the other. But what I can say, in the interest of transparency and accountability to the people of this country, is that when we finally make that decision, we'll be considering, one, the law, so that the commission is seen now and tomorrow as an institution who has a value for respect to the rule of law and that lives by that. That is number one. Number two, the commission is also very conscious that there has to be a register on the 3rd of December this year. Because if you're holding the election on 4th of March, that register must reach some stage of preparation. And you stop tampering with the register, it must be ready by the 3rd of December this year. So we are very much conscious that that should be done. You recall, we got a bit of a reprieve recently when initially it was said that people would move from one party to the other within 90 days. That was relaxed a bit to 60 days. That is no great consolation. But the assurance that we can give is that we are looking for a system and a mechanism that will not only ensure that we register the maximum number of voters as we put in our strategic plan, but also at the end of it, done in a manner that has got absolute respect for the rule of law.
Okay, fantastic. Let me come to you, Kipchumba. People who are still concerned about boundaries issues. Many people who had issues here and there, names, locations. What would you advise them as Kenya tries to head towards an election in March?
There is something unique about that. In my own opinion, I believe that the law was intended, the intention of the Constitution was to have the High Court to be the final arbiter when it comes to questions of boundaries. But there is another interpretation that the right to appeal is there, and so you can appeal to Court of Appeal and Supreme Court. But I hold a different view. I strongly believe that what the decision the court made the other day, the 5-judge bench did, was final. Final because if you go to presidential petitions, for example, there is only one court that deals with that, Supreme Court. If you look at employment appeals, they only come from the tribunal to the High Court, and that's final. So I believe that when the Constitution talked about High Court making that decision within 3 months, it was the final court of, a final court to make that decision. So that is the first thing. The second issue is that as Kenyans, we must also start to accept to coexist. If you see the basis, the grounds under which people were appealing was that we don't like this other community, we don't like this clan. How, if you don't like yourselves in a ward or in a constituency, how possibly are you going to elect a president who comes perhaps from another tribe and still live in a country called Kenya?
Right.
So I think those are the things that we need to iron out as a country and begin accepting each other. The second thing is that you go discussion all over and people are saying we want to share seats between this community and the other one because now we're within the same boundary. I want to remind Kenyans that you are not electing a tribe. The governor, the senator, the ward rep, you are not electing their tribe. The law says a person seeking to be a senator, a person seeking to be a governor, you are not electing his tribe. That is why you recall that person, you don't recall their tribe. So we must be in a position to begin electing them based on also the qualities and qualification. But I have a challenge on IEBC. I think IEBC has greater responsibility than just the procurement we are talking about. Are they able to monitor election financial spending? What mechanism, do they have the necessary expertise and persons on the ground to be able to see whether people are buying voters, whether the process of buying people is going on? Are they in a position to look at election violence should it occur? Are they possibly going to be ready to disqualify, to be strong and say we are disqualifying so and so because their party, as the law says, has not followed the procedure for nomination? Because in some regions in this country, if you are not nominated in party X, you may not see the door of parliament. So if IEBC is not serious in dealing with irregularities at the nomination level, then we are not going to go anywhere as a country.
Critical, James, and especially because the policing of IEBC can only start at a certain point. So what would you say to that? What is your capacity and preparedness for that?
number of things. First of all, there is the campaign finance bill. This has been crafted by IEBC in consultation with various stakeholders, and this seeks to regulate the campaign financing, the source of finance, the source of funds, how it is used, and the accounting for it. That will help a lot of things in terms of regulating the financial expenditures and during the election. Some of that, because this is an issue that has been ignored in the past. Now we have that in order to help the process not only of mobilization of funds, but also the usage of those funds and the accountability for those funds. That is number one. Secondly, I would want to say that going back to the boundary issue, there were no victors, none was vanquished. IEBC went out there, the law required. We listened to Kenyans' view, and we did all that we could in order to bring Kenyans together. The High Court has made a ruling, by and large accepting what the IEBC did. Certainly, there are those who would still feel aggrieved, but it has to be understood that this is a process, a consultative process, and that there'll be time again in the next future, because boundary delimitation is done between 8 and 12 years. So there'll be time again to redo this at the constituency level. And also that people should realize that the boundary delimitation at the ward level is a continuous thing. It can be done any other time. So people should not feel like we lost or we won. It is a process of building an institution. It's a process of building relationship. Lastly, Kipchumba talks about can we be able to enforce the legal regime that has been brought up, put in place to regulate. The Elections Act is very clear, and the IEBC Act is also very clear. And start with the IEBC Act. The IEBC Act establishes a code for electoral officials and anybody who is for the time being assigned to the commission to do electoral work. You become subject to the code. And there is a provision that says if you do certain things willfully or negligently, you are subject to a certain sanction. Right. And it's a very tough sanction, 3 years or a huge fine to pay. That is for our staff. The Elections Act, on the other hand, has brought up very elaborate provisions that deal almost every aspect of management of elections. Now, the point is, can we effectively do the policing? The Commission it's in the process of recruiting, we have created a department. This department is recruiting prosecutors and also investigators. Now, you need these prosecutors so that the Commission autonomously, without recourse to another institution or another organ of government,
is able to
conduct that. But you need the investigators, because if you don't have your own in-house investigators and you rely on somebody else, the standards cannot be harmonized. So we have advertised for a position, and we are in the process of recruiting in order to establish a completely new department that deals with the prosecutions and also the investigation that is needed to support it. That is in place.
That is fascinating. That is.
Then you have the Political Parties Act.
Yes.
And all the others that need to be done. But Julie, at the end of the day, when the Electoral Commission has done its bit to enforce the Campaign Finance Act, to enforce the Elections Act, to enforce a Political Parties Act, there is still you and Kipchumba here.
Yes, there is. Yes.
So people should ask themselves, the Commission alone and on its own cannot ensure that we have peaceful, transparent, and accountable elections. The Commission will do its constitutional and statutory responsibility. And it's not just a promise. We will deliver. I can say that without any fear of contradiction or fear. But you and yourself, what is your role? So that we collectively say, as a nation, we are committed to having an effective, transparent elections. And each one of us says, this is my responsibility.
Thank you for that, James. And with that, we've really got to wind up. And we have taken a bit more time today. I think very important. We'll welcome you back and others from the IEBC to continue discussing and focusing on our preparedness as we head into March. Kenya Kwanza. Let's put Kenya first. Let's not think tribal. Let's ask our leaders, what are you going to deliver for us as a people? What are you going to do with the budgets that come to you, our money, for our development? So elect people who are responsible capable of leading you. Thank you so much. That's it for the Kibaki succession this week, gentlemen. It's been an absolute